pleasure and honor of introducing a woman and minister and doctor that I just so admire. And any of you that have ever met Dr. Sue, now you know what the definition of a hot potato really is. I'm telling you, I'm going to give you a little bit of her history. So just to let you know, she began studying with Dr. Tom Johnston over in the West Valley. And then once she studied with Dr. Tom, he said, go forth and prosper. So what she did was she went and candidated in Edmonton, Canada. But she didn't just candidate. Can I just tell you that she showed up in a red leather suit with matching red leather boots. We know that because we heard that from Dr. Heather Clark, who became one of Dr. Sue's students. So she said, we were a little bit surprised when the woman candidating was like, holy cats, showed up. And I thought, man, we're in for a rocket ride here. So that was neat. So she stayed at Edmonton, and just to let you know, she just flew back and just celebrated Edmonton's 30th year as a functioning center, which deserves an applause right there. And she was the launching pad for that, which is amazing. She went on from there via Honolulu, I believe, to go start the Westlake Church, or to go take it up, not start it, to take it over. And take it over she did in a storm. She was there for 13 years, and now she is the minister emeritus, and I believe the baton was handed over to Dr. Maureen Hoyt, who we know and love. She is now spending her time servicing many, many New Thought centers. She teaches, she mentors, she does the service, she does speaking, she does all sorts of things. And she's just a dynamo. So please, let's give her a warm Redondo Beach welcome. Dr. Sue Rubin.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Sorry I didn't wear the red leather today, if only I had known. And I have a slight correction. Actually, there was no church in Canada to candidate for. It was the suggestion of Dr. Frank Richelieu, who was the candidating and officiating in all of those fields for the ministers that held that position. So that when I was ready to go into ministry, because Tom Johnson didn't say go forth, he said, get out. You've been here long enough. You've been here enough. It's about time you set your own pace and did your own thing. You're not taking over here, so get that idea out of your head. So when I finally brought myself to a position of readiness to say, okay, I'm going into ministry, I'm doing this. And so I went to Frank and said, so what have you got available? In a warm, sunny climate, close to home, already with a flourishing financial balance sheet, and they're just looking for me. They've just been waiting for me. And he said, sorry, the only thing that we have is a New Thought Independent Center has just affiliated with Religious Science International at the time. And they want to have a minister so they can officially be a chartered church of religious science. Would you be willing to give that a go? They'll pay your expenses. That already pushed me on the affirmative side. And you'll take a trip and you'll see what it's all about. I went, great, where am I going? He says, Edmonton. And I said, where in California is that? So began the saga. So I went, and indeed, Dr. Heather Clark, who has been the senior director, spiritual leader of the San Juan Capistrano Valley Center for these many years, she actually is an Edmontonian, and so she was the president of the board at the time, and she was my go-to to negotiate everything that had to ensue. And so it's been a great journey, and yes, that was 30 years ago. So the question is begging, so what have you done lately? You know, that's what mind requires of all of us, truly. The interesting thing that happened is the morning, of course it was prefaced, but only by a very brief span of time. The morning before I was leaving for Edmonton, my ex-husband made his transition. And although we were married for 20 years and divorced many, many, many more years than that, we always remained friends. And in fact, many of you know he was my travel agent. So instead of sending me somewhere, he sent himself, which under the circumstances, that's okay. That's all right. So there was a lot going on in my world, and going off script became something that started immediately, showing me how I show up when things are not under my control, the way I have preconceived them, established them in my imagination as I think they should be. So there are the big things, the grandiose stages of newness that we bring into our world. But I'm talking more about what it's like when your expectations aren't fulfilled and you are asked to go off script. And I saw me showing up in that regard, even as recently as this past Sunday. I was speaking at the Center for Spiritual Living in Pleasant Valley. Anybody know what Pleasant Valley is? It's another name for Camarillo, close by. And, you know, as always, Dr. Sue, here's the program, and here's who's doing the music, and this is what we'll be doing, and you're up, and this one's doing that. You know, it's all laid out, just as you have it, all predictable right here. However, my own unpredictability showed up because they were doing a lot of work on the freeways where I live, and the two closest on-ramps that would take me north on the 101 were both closed. Now, those who know me, next time could you please move this podium and the flowers back so that I can get by more easily? I'm going to put that on my request. So I realized you're going to be late. So I called and no one picked up. And when I got there, the ordinarily very prepared and harmonious and everyone in their place, it was like thoroughly askew. The presider and the practitioner of the day hadn't shown up. The musician was still rehearsing because he had gotten there late too. And in the I walk, well, it was like freeze. Everybody just kind of looked at each other. And what do we do that we do best? It's like, hello, let's do a treatment. So we did a treatment. And somehow the pieces fell into place. Because in the few short years that I have lived on this earth plane, I have come to discover that the intelligence and the clarity and the answers and solutions that are available through and from and as universal mind in action as us, you don't have availability or accessibility to them when fear, rushing, hurrying, confusion, anxiety, apprehension set in. Have you noticed that in your world? It's like, forget it. That part of our connection has not been cut off because God has disappeared other than from our own awareness. That essence, that energy, that which calls us to conscious union with the divine. To me, that's what practice is about, and that's what living in the present moment is about. It's I maintain my conscious contact with God. Let's say that. I maintain my conscious contact with God at all times and under all circumstances. At all times and under all circumstances. So, off the script. Let's go off the script and work with what we have been taught according to this creative intelligence of mind, that as much of a demand as we place upon universal mind is as much as it can supply us with. We are not making anything happen, but we are creating within ourselves an avenue of awareness through which that higher clarity, intelligence, energy, and wisdom has access. So we truly are these instrumentalities, these vehicles through which the infinite shows up in finite form. And obviously, that doesn't always look like this steady, solid, consciously aware being. So, off script. So the other day, I go to do some shopping in Ralph's, and I'm all finished, and then I look at my watch, and I say, you better get a little speed on because you have a bridal shower this evening, and time's really starting to tighten up in the relative sense. Stand and stretch into universal energy? No, not at that moment. So I, and I moved, and I shake, and I bake, and I'm out of the door, and suddenly it's like, where are my sunglasses? The ones I just bought last week. Where are my sunglasses? Did I remember the treat? No, it's like whisk around, go back, trace every single step at every department, the papayas and the apples and the groceries, and it's like, what did you forget? Do it again. I was like on this craziness over what? Over a pair of sunglasses. Had I but stopped to say, with the God eyes that Reverend Louisa was talking about, I see things more clearly. And the issue no longer becomes, I've got to have it, it's got to show up. I always, when things get lost, just reflect on the marvel of that niche that Reverend Harriet Foster had. She was the go-to person. If ever you lost anything, it didn't matter, she didn't need to know what it was, but who was here in Reverend Harriet Foster's time? Glorious, glorious expression of God. She just had that knowingness, and that's what it takes for us. There is no difference, you know and I know, according to what has always been said and taught. There is no difference in that one mind as to greater or lesser. The whole thing spins around what I am infusing the situation with in terms of my energy of thought, my consciousness. If I'm spinning in confusion, then I can simply stand at the door and expect and receive the confusion that results. If, however, I've taken a moment to really be still and know that right where I am, the complete divine potentiality of spirit is, and as much of it as I can claim and embody is really mine to utilize and to use for benefit, not just to myself, but to the world. So to go off script, you remember years ago, a psychologist was on the radio, I think on KABC, Tony Grant, and Tony Grant used to say, life is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. And really, we rehearse, if you really think of it, a lot of our lives, and for our betterment. So much of what has already been rehearsed are the things that we, as she gracefully moved from left stage to right, a lot of what we have already accomplished has been something that has been submitted into the deeper subconscious mind, and it's formulated a habit. And most of that is so that life is easier. When I get into my car, I know what to do. When it's time to brush my teeth or take a shower or do any of those things which are already automatic, it's due to the faculty of our conscious mind at one point deciding that was what we were doing, and then the impression, the impress of that thought, being reacted upon by mind, which creates the accompanying result. You ever think of, how could we say that more simply to somebody? So how does mind work? A newcomer to science of mind asks. And I go through this elaborate, ideally a little bit on the scientific, it's the science of mind, so it is scientific, and yet to be able to say, just the way the ancients did, it is done unto you as you believe. What goes around comes around. As you sow it, boom, it's going to show up on your doorstep. Who is the intermediary to our relationship with universal mind? Ourself, our human perception, my own realization of how deep do I want to go? How high do I want to fly? That's really the question. And although my earlier life didn't start out that way, with the passing of my, I've got the water sitting on a tilt. It's good. That's going off script. So, for example, when I think about the early days of my marriage and how scripted that was, coming from a lineage, Jewish, middle class, New York City, 21, this is the year, get married. Okay, nice Jewish girl, middle class, New York City, married at 21, great. Now wait 4 years until you have your first child. Boom, 4 years later, my son was born. Now wait another 4 years would be good for your second child. This was, in the 40s I'm talking. Yeah, I was married in 1949, so it's like, figure it out. I've been around a few summers. So that was the script. That's what you did. You had your second child 4 years later, and then all hell in a basket, or however that goes, because then, several years later, I had a third, and then decided to get divorced. So I definitely went off script, I would say, at that point. And so at what point we go off script? We give up the rehearsed life in order to become more fully alive, I believe, to the present moment. So that in the moments when there was no way I had established the consciousness that could ever reclaim those sunglasses in Ralph's, which they're gone, there's the same principle that applies. There is no way that I can claim a physical healing or manifest the dollars that I want and then more, or anything that exceeds the conditional limitations of what I'm presently going through. I have got to arise to a new and greater idea, and at the same time know that I am still incorporating and bringing with me that which is of value as a foundation for this new idea, but the new idea takes me beyond what was while including what was. I mean, that's a really, to me, significant point about science of mind. It's a statement that Judge Thomas Trord said so beautifully, and I think it was the creative process, when he described that my mind is the center of divine operation. Anybody remember that quote? And he goes on to distinguish that even though my mind is the center of divine operation, I'm still pulling from past ideas in order to give myself a fresh trajectory point with which to launch forward into something even greater. And yet sometimes at that very moment when life says, yoo-hoo, I'm here now, why are you looking over your shoulder to the past or anticipating something that hasn't shown up yet? This is the only moment. How more often do we have to be told that? And in the moment that I ignore this moment, I'm ignoring what really is the divine script for my life, which holds untold blessings and joys and discoveries, which I can personally attest to just because of having been in ministry at the time for 25 years. I pretty much had a script. I knew how ministry was supposed to work and how I would like it to work beneficially for everyone. And when I stepped down from that 25-year preparatory cycle, it was like, so now what? There's no script. I like to dance, you can see that, so it's like, that's what I'm doing. So if there's no script, then I, again, as much of a demand as I am willing to place into that universal mind is as much as I will see again showing up at my doorstep. So I believe firmly and deeply in not only the power of creative mind, that's the impersonality of the law. That simply is, as you think it and believe it truly, not just lip service, but truly in your heart and soul, what you believe is done unto you. There is something of an invisible seeing eye and hearing ear that takes that strongest energy of conviction and faith, and whatever it is we believe or not believe, that's exactly what we see in our experience. And yet beyond that, it becomes more and more through practice the realization of the essence of love, the presence of the divine, which is, it's limitless, it's timeless, it's spaceless, it's the smile on our face, and it's the sadness in the loss of a dear friend. It's everything that comprises a life that's really being fully lived. There's a wonderful story in a great book. If any of you are familiar with Mark Nepo, anybody read Mark Nepo? I think one of his earliest books was the Book of Awakening. And this one's called The Exquisite Risk. And he tells the story of a friend of his who decides that he's going to paint his house. And he's going to start right with the den. That seems the easiest. Goes to the paint store, gets the gallons of paint and the brushes and the drop cloths and whatever you use to clean the brushes and the pails, and arrives at his doorstep with everything in tow. And he puts the cloth under his arm, and he's like balancing the gallons, and had left the door open a little bit, but it somehow had caught, so he had to do something. But he was determined, I'm not putting this stuff down. I've got it all organized, and I'm barging the gates of heaven. It's okay to sit down there, don't have to feel. Go off script. So he gathers, stands firm in his gathering of everything that he's got. And all of a sudden, as he's pushing in the door, just about pops open, he loses his stepping, falls back with the paint all over him. Okay, so, of course, immediately it's like, oh, you know what he said. And then he laughed, he saw this picture of himself just bathed in red and had to laugh. But the point he was making is everything about that creative mind says, yes, a desire. Let's freshen up the house, paint the room, do what we're going to do. Next step, prepare. Get what you need to do the job you want to do. First in consciousness, you've declared it, you've established it. Now let's go forth and do it. Come to the point of entry. You've got everything gathered together, and now you're ready to enter. But, and you can humanly equate this with any situation in your life, but you're still not willing to put down what you don't need in order to gain easy entry forward. Can you see that? It's so clear to me what I've been experiencing lately, just in working with the idea of going off script. Going off strip? Oh, okay. We'll talk about that one later. So if I'm not willing to drop the things I am carrying in order for this greater idea, I'll still be utilizing the stuff I'm bringing along with me, but it won't be an impediment and it won't limit me in my experience of life. So that story for me became, it's the process of life. It's like gathering, and it's doing the preparatory work in consciousness through our meditation daily, through our prayer work, through times we spend in solitude and in silence. We are so articulate, all of us, and we're so knowledgeable, all of us, that we've got to continually spew the stuff that we know. And yet, to know about something is not the same as knowing it. To know about God is a very different story. It's the beginning of the story, but it's not the be-all, end-all of knowing God, feeling. In my highest times and in my lowest times, I can still hold that point of recognition of my unity with the divine. And so if going off script means giving up the stuff I've gathered, and yet I still want to drag it all with me and enter into a new place, there's a time of divine discernment and evaluation and assessment whereby I make a clear, discerned decision. Does that mean now get thee out? Well, how fast? What is that signal? How many minutes?
Keep going.
So, Winding it up, she said. Okay, winding it up. So, if at any given moment what you're experiencing, I know we're all experiencing something. You cannot be living in times that we're living in with what's going on financially, globally, warring and violence, and let's not even talk about political candidating. There's just so much that is spinning outwardly, and yet unless we take our inner world with us into the outer world, we can just as well give up and say, what's the point? So the takeaway, really, what is it? We talk a good game, but darn it, it's not enough anymore. We've talked a good game for years. God is all there is, God and I are one. All that God is, I am. Great. How does that show up in your life these days? And what am I doing in my life to benefit someone else so that I can be that messenger of light and life and love, that no matter where I go, my presence is of benefit to someone around me. And when I fall down, I pick myself up again, and I lovingly, compassionately, and wisely deal with my own foibles, with my own idiosyncrasies, and I come spinning back to center to truly know, perhaps for the first time, God is, I am, all is that which God is, and so it is.